Kira had heard of freak shows at the circus from her grandfather's tales of growing up in the 1940s. She couldn't believe that today she was actually going to see one. According to her grandfather, these types of shows fell out of favor years ago as more and more people saw genetic mutations and things like that as something to be pitied and not exploited for someone else's monetary gain. Kira didn't care too much about that. She just wanted to see something freaky. It wasn't quite raining on this cool autumn evening, but there was a bit of mist in the air as Kira and her friend James snuck out of James's window before bedtime. At this point, they were both experts at sneaking out and not getting caught by their parents. They'd explored so much of the city that they thought they knew most of it. But 2 nights ago, they'd found a flyer that had advertised a freak show.
I think we're in for a treat,
Kira said as she held the advertisement in her hand, walking towards the location listed on the flyer. I still can't believe you just found that flyer lying on the ground the other day. I didn't even see it until you picked it up, said James as he was keeping step with Kyra.
You just aren't as observant as I am. Maybe you should look into getting glasses,
said Kira, smiling as she lightly poked James with her elbow. I'm good at seeing things that are important. James's retort was more of an admonition than a statement as his arm darted across Kira's chest, keeping her from walking into oncoming traffic. If you weren't so busy teasing me, maybe you'd see that there was a car coming before crossing the street. James loved when he got to be right anytime he traded banter with Kira. Kira knew it and let him have this win. Besides, he did actually save her life. That wasn't the first time her life had been saved by him either. James had been there for her during her most depressing times, and he'd pulled her from the brink of despair after her parents had died. Her grandfather was doing the best he could, but he was old and didn't understand her feelings. He grew up in a time where feelings were considered a luxury, but he did try.
Okay, it should be down here,
said Kira as she peered down a dark alley. So they set up a whole circus freak show at some building down this creepy alley? Said James, peering down the alleyway.
Yeah, looks a little creepy down there, doesn't it?
Yeah. And also a little bit strange that neither one of us has seen this alley before. Not once. And you know I know this city, Kira.
Yeah, that is strange. I agree, but we both want to see the show, don't we?
Of course. I'm just pointing out all the crazy stuff. So if anything happens to me, just know that I plan on haunting you until you die, and then I'll haunt your ghost. As long as you're good with that, let's go ahead and proceed down the alleyway of darkness and death.
Ha ha ha. Okay, Mr. Melodramatic. I get your point. We will be careful, but we're both survivors. We can take care of ourselves. Okay, you need to chill. Even I was starting to get concerned for a minute there.
Good. Then my job here is done. They continued down the alley until they could see no more light from the street they had just been on. There were a few dimly lit windows scattered here and there as they made their way to the location listed on the flyer. It was a nondescript door with the same logo that was printed on the page she held in her hand.
This must be it.
Must be. So how do we get in?
I guess we knock?
Kira and James both jumped back and let out a scream as the door opened before Kyra had a chance to knock. You scared the crap out of us. The large, bald man didn't say a word. He just opened the door as wide as possible and made a welcoming gesture, ushering them inside. The interior of the building looked just as dilapidated as the exterior. There were candles lit everywhere, giving off a soft and creepy glow that barely illuminated the cobwebs and dust on the office furniture. The tall, bald man gestured for them to follow him.
Sure thing,
said Kira as she grabbed James's arm and followed the man deeper into the building. Once down a strange hallway, they walked past different doors that were all just as nondescript as the one they got into the building. They heard disturbing sounds coming from each one, but figured it was all part of the show. Some sounds were human whimpers, others were more like growls, and there were a few muffled shrieks that came from the distance. They weren't that loud, but it was enough to make Kira and James both jump when they heard it. Suddenly, their host stopped in front of one of the nondescript doors and placed his fingers to his lips. He opened the door. At first, Kira couldn't believe what she was seeing, but after staring in the corner of a room that was filled with what looked like trees, she saw a dog or a boy that looked like a dog. She couldn't tell exactly what she was looking at. He was sitting there with his back fur sticking up and growling at them. Just as he let out a loud bark, the host nonchalantly closed the door just in time before the dog boy could sink his teeth into their flesh. That was crazy, Kira. This is nuts. James was breathing super heavy and his eyes were wide with shock and quite a bit of fear.
I know. I didn't even think anything like that was possible. Where did you guys find that thing? You guys take care of them here?
The host just smiled at Kira and shrugged. They motioned for them to follow him further down the hallway. He came to another door and slowly opened it. They walked inside the room and could see a giant fish tank that filled most of the area. There were all types of fish that could be seen, along with coral reef and what looked like a real shipwreck at the bottom of the tank. Okay, this one is a bit more tame, said James. He looked a bit more calm since entering this room. The water and all the marine life seemed peaceful.
What is that?
Asked Kira. I don't know what you're looking at, James said as he pressed his face up against the glass. There was a severed human head with cold, dead eyes staring at him directly on the other side of the glass. Kira and James both jumped back in fear as they heard a loud screech and saw what looked like a half fish, half almost human-like creature holding the head by the hair and then swimming away. Kira and James were both in the hallway in record time. They were still yelling when the door was shut by their host. Did you see the bite marks on the bottom of the neck, Kira?
Yes, that poor man's head had to have been chewed off his body.
All right, mister. We're done here. We don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah, I think we've had enough.
Agreed Kira. Can we go back? James was practically begging. The host just kept his creepy smile and shook his head. Suddenly, the hallway leading to where they entered appeared even darker, if that was even possible. The man held out his index finger and motioned for them to follow him as he continued down the hall.
I guess the only way out is forward.
Kira's voice quivered a little bit, but she knew she was right. James did too. He just nodded and followed as well. The host held out his finger to his lips one more time and slowly opened the door.
Why does each room have to be so dark?
Whispered Kyra as they tiptoed deeper into the room. It stunk in here. Bad. They finally made it to what looked like the center of the room and saw a solitary balloon that was illuminated from within. It was floating on its own. As they got closer, it started floating away. They didn't understand why, but they felt compelled to follow it. It felt like there was nothing more important in their life than to follow that balloon around the room until the balloon came to a sudden halt in front of what looked like a large, old-fashioned wardrobe, and then it popped. James pulled out his phone and turned on the torchlight. I can't believe I didn't think about this before.
Yeah, we're both kind of dumb for that.
Agreed Kira as she turned her torchlight on as well. So what are we supposed to do now?
I don't know. The balloon led us to this wardrobe thing, so I guess we're supposed to open it, right?
That feels like the last thing we should do, Kira.
I know. But I don't think we have a choice.
Fine. Just do it so that we can get out of here. I want to go home.
Me too.
Kira reached towards the wardrobe and slowly pulled the door open. It was pitch black in there. Can't see a thing, said James, and then both of their lights were off simultaneously.
What? Oh no.
Kira scrambled to turn her phone back on, but her hands were shaking so much it was extremely difficult. Finally, she turned it on.
James?
James was nowhere to be seen. She let out a quiet sob and shone her light around the cavernous room and couldn't see him anymore.
James!
She screamed and just heard the echo of her own voice, but she felt something else. She felt the hair stand up on the back of her neck. She knew there was something or someone behind her, but she also knew she didn't want to turn around and see it. Kira whimpered again. She knew that she had to. She had to turn around. She slowly turned, watching the light from her phone illuminate the area. As she turned,
oh no.
Kira ran as fast as she could towards where the door was. She saw that it was shut and felt for sure she wouldn't make it in time to open it, but before this clown thing could get to her, but she still ran. She was just about a foot away from the doorknob, but her hand was already in motion, reaching out to turn it. As soon as her hand made contact with the metal, she turned it and pulled the door towards her, running into the hallway. This wasn't the hallway. This was her bedroom. She was back home. Kira just dropped to her knees and started crying. It was all she could do. Why does she have to follow that stupid flyer? That's what caused all this horror tonight. And James, What happened to James? As her thoughts went to her friend, she heard a little giggle come from her bed. Kira was already on her knees, so she crawled on all fours towards the bed.
James, are you playing games with me?
She asked as her voice was still just a little whisper and quivering with fear. Kira made it to the bed and turned on her phone's light. She only saw one thing, and then darkness. Circus freak shows, a once popular form of entertainment, offered a glimpse into the extraordinary and unusual. These spectacles, often characterized by their sensationalism and exploitation, revealed much about societal attitudes towards difference and disability. Individuals labeled as freaks in the circus faced significant ethical dilemmas and challenges. Exploited for their unique physical characteristics, they were often subjected to demeaning and humiliating performances. The circus environment, characterized by harsh conditions and limited opportunities for personal growth, further exacerbated their plight. Now, we do know that there were some that actually enjoyed the situation. There were some that wanted to be there, and I could do stories on those, but many were actually exploited. So I don't want to say that the whole thing was bad, because again, there were people that made good money off of that. Some of the freaks that made good money off of it, but others weren't so fortunate. Some, that's the only home they could find, and it wasn't a good home. The Circus Freak Show often served as a place of refuge for individuals with extraordinary physical differences, offering them a means of survival in a society that frequently marginalized and stigmatized them. However, this refuge often came at a significant cost. Joseph Merrick, the Elephant Man, is perhaps the most famous example of a circus freak. Born with a rare genetic condition that caused severe physical deformities, Merrick endured a life of suffering and discrimination before finding refuge in the circus. Despite his fame, he remained a prisoner of his own body, subjected to the gaze of curious onlookers and the exploitation of unscrupulous showmen. Other notable circus freaks included Annie Jones, a woman with a rare genetic condition that caused her to have excess skin, and Charles Byrne, a man with giganticism. These individuals, like Merrick, were often portrayed as objects of curiosity, their bodies dissected and analyzed by the public. While they may have gained a measure of fame and fortune, their lives were marked by hardship and exploitation. The relationship between circus freaks and the audience was complex. On one hand, the audience was drawn to the spectacle of the unusual, fascinated by the human body's diversity. However, this fascination often bordered on exploitation, as individuals with disabilities were treated as objects of curiosity rather than human beings. A turning point in the history of circus freaks occurred as public outcry against these spectacles began to grow. Activists and reformers argued that freak shows were exploitative and dehumanizing, challenging the prevailing societal attitudes towards difference. This shift in public opinion ultimately led to the decline of freak shows, and paved the way for greater acceptance and inclusion of individuals with disabilities. I hope that wasn't too scary for you. The beginning story, that is. If you're captivated by these stories of the extraordinary and the overlooked, make sure to like and subscribe to the Lore Chronicles. We'll continue to delve into the fascinating world of ancient lore and urban legends, and together, let's shed light on their stories and ensure that none of them are forgotten. Remember, the stories I'm telling now are original and created by me. So if you like them, let me know. And also let me know which stories you'd like me to write about in the future. I absolutely love doing this. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time.